How are you?
I'm doing good.
I am so excited to have this conversation with you because I've gotten to know you over the last probably 6, 12 months. And
Yeah.
we get to share a common, I would call it, client on a board, and just getting to hear your experience and your stories. And then I was very excited when we were sitting there at an event recently. I'm like, hey, you should just tell your story on my podcast. And because you had mentioned the show, I'm like, well, if you're listening, we might as well get you on it. And I remember your logo of your company. Like,
Do you really?
I do remember seeing it. And then when I was kind of doing a little bit of the digging prior to our call, I can't believe it's been that long actually since you sold. So I'm excited that you're willing to share the ins and outs.
It was a long time ago.
I can't think. I mean, it's just fascinating how fast that all goes. So anyways, I will stop rambling. Why don't you give everybody a little bit of your background, and then we'll start, with your journey all the way at the point that you and I were talking about.
Okay. Like what I'm doing now?
Yeah, just kind of just a high level overview, kind of just what you're doing now, and we can go back to then how you started in your professional career.
Yeah. So actually, I sold my company a long time ago, and I finally walked out of there in like 2008. And I've been on a journey since then, doing all kinds of interesting things, traveling to Africa to work with women, teaching them about business, and gotten involved in more financing kinds of how to finance companies, involved with Venn Foundation, Hill Capital, and other organizations like that. So that's kind of what I'm spending my time on. That plus doing the mentoring, which I really love to do for young companies. So that's really kind of what I'm up to.
So as you and I were talking about right before we hit record, you didn't just jump right into entrepreneurship. By the way, Jeanne, I don't know if you've listened to these podcasts. Like, it was like for years, I used to ask people like, hey, why did you decide to become an entrepreneur? People are like, I didn't decide, it just happened. So I quit asking that question. So why don't you just give us a little bit of
okay. That'll be interesting. And you'll hear why.
So, the background in your career that led up to that. Why don't you just give us kind of a starting point and where you want to start the story?
Okay, I want to go back to where I was raised, which is in a little town in North Dakota, Enderlin, North Dakota. And because this is really pretty formative. This is a Catholic family, 5 kids. I'm the second of 5 kids. My parents were both born actually in 1920. So they're just coming out of World War I. And so their formative years were in the Depression.
Yeah, a lot of behaviors I can assume that got cemented in during that time.
Like no debt, certain kinds of values no debt did not work well for running a company. But and so it was uppermost in their mind was to get all 5 of their kids through college. That was like their dream. And they managed with 4 of us, which was really pretty good odds. So we did that. And then I started getting into music at a really young age. By 4th grade, the band teacher wanted me to play tenor saxophone, which was the instrument they needed. So I did. It wasn't much fun then, but by the time I got into high school, I could be in a jazz band, and that was really fun.
Awesome.
And I learned piano and played drums for a while. And as it turned out, I was pretty musical. And on my mom's side of the family, her 4 brothers were all musicians, and they had a dance band when they grew up.
Oh, fun.
And in fact, my mom and dad met at one of those dances.
Oh, cool.
So by the time I got to be about a freshman in high school, it became apparent that I could sing. And so I started doing a lot of singing and solo work. And my oldest brother drove me to Fargo Moorhead State to take singing lessons. That's what my parents wanted me to do. I was my father's darling. He was my coach and he was my mentor. He knew exactly how to motivate me. So I have wonderful, very fond memories of him.
That's awesome.
So yeah.
Were any of your siblings as talented as you with the diverse set of skills?
Not on the music side. My younger brothers, they had my youngest brother should have been a star. He should have gone into finance and done that, but he did not. There's sort of this risk aversion thing. In fact, when I left my corporate job, my dad was really concerned. He could not understand why I would leave a corporate job where I was making really good money. I had respect, all this stuff. So that was a tough thing to do.
Yeah, it was probably, I can't even imagine
Like,
all the narratives that were in his head from the Great Depression, all this
exactly.
stuff. And it's like, you have exactly what we wanted and needed. I can only imagine that was probably the cognitive dissonance in his head.
Yeah, it was really hard for him. And that was when my mom stood up for me and she said, you know, Bob, this isn't our life. This is Jeannie. She gets to live it the way she wants. So my mother really stepped forward in my
Nice.
defense at that point. So that was really cool. So, but anyway, I went away to school and studied music. I studied opera and
Oh, so
voice.
cool.
I did a stint in St. Paul Opera Company as an apprentice, which was really good because it was then that I learned that that was definitely not what I wanted to do.
Hard
It
part of
was,
the journey, is it? No, nope, don't want to do that.
yeah, it was everybody is focused on one thing, which is the development of them as a performer. And I was just interested in everything. I was interested in the world. I came from this little town of 1,800 people. I wanted to experience the world. So I didn't do that. And then I went on and got a couple of sales jobs. And that was sort of where I started with my music ed degree. And I worked for Dunham Bradstreet doing a marketing research, selling marketing research. Then the last job I did, I was actually pretty good at sales, was a Coldwell Banker.
Oh no.
And it was
It's awesome.
selling commercial real estate and renting office space. And it was then that I thought, you know, I don't want to just sell this stuff. I want to do something more. I want to learn more about it. And so I started interviewing for jobs and I interviewed for this mortgage banker job. And I still remember sitting across the table from that guy. And he said, so now remember, this is like many years ago. And he said, what is it that makes you think that someone with a music degree can do this job? And those are always fighting words for me.
Yeah. Well, do you want to
Whenever
watch me do it? Yes.
That's right. Whenever anybody says that to me, it's okay. I got it.
Oh, that's
Um,
awesome.
so I said, okay, I know I'm going to do this. I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to get an MBA, and I'm going to choose finance because it's the credential I need that everybody thinks you need. So I did that.
Oh,
So I went to school.
that's awesome. Did you ever have any interactions with that mortgage broker ever again?
Never,
No. You
never.
can thank him for
You
everything,
know,
though, right?
it was a path, and it was interesting because I wanted to do more of the analytical side, and I'm not really. I mean, I'm a problem solver, but I'm not so analytical in the classic sense of the word.
Is there a theme between music, the creativity, and finance and
Oh yeah,
entrepreneur? I was just gonna
yeah.
say I could.
Music and math. There's a huge. I had many professors in at MBA school that were pianists or were musicians. So there definitely is. There's something in your brain that
Huh,
works that same way.
interesting. That's awesome. So, after the MBA, when you went and got the MBA? Was there a specific career or specific position that you wanted after you were doing that, or just
I
to
didn't
open up
know.
doors?
I was really open. I didn't really know. And I did an internship, and it happened to be at the old First Bank, which is now US Bank. And so I went there and worked for a summer in the strategic planning department. And because this is in the early 80s now you can kind of get the time. And this is when it was all the Boston Consulting Group, all these little charts where you do these bubble charts. That
For
was my
sure,
first job.
for sure. Yes, yes.
That was my first job. And it was cool because I had exposure to the president. My boss in strategic planning had, that was
Hmm.
his report. And so I had exposure to
Oh,
him.
cool.
So I started developing a relationship early on. And I did go back there, and that was my first job out of grad school. And yes, that's where I started my corporate career, as it were.
So what was driving you along these? I mean, these are pretty decent pivots about leaning into music, then leaning into, what someone tells you, you going in to get the MBA, and like what was there a specific outcome that you're looking for, or a specific type of experience that was driving you, or just the personal growth?
No, I think it's more, I'm really, I can be really achievement oriented. I mean, that is my motivator. I'm into achievement. However you mark that, sometimes it's money, but oftentimes it's not. Money is not a motivator for me. It's really achievement.
Oh, okay.
Um, and so it's just trying things to see if I can do them.
So when people tell you, "Hey, what makes you think you could do this?" Those are
Yeah, like that.
those are battle words. I love
Yeah, those are the
it.
words, and
So
it comes up again and again.
so what happened after you're at Boston Consulting Group? I mean, what was where was there a couple of stepping stones before you started the business, or what was the kind of the
Oh, no,
inception?
no, no, no. So I spent 9 years.
Okay.
I was 39 years old by the time I left that bank.
Oh wow.
So, but the big thing that happened to me when I turned 30 is that I had this diagnosis of MS. And it was sort of like I'd just gotten out of school. Here I am at my best, my the job that I really wanted. And it was like I was just knocked back. And, I had to miss work. It took me time. I don't know how much you know about MS, but there's numbness in your body.
I was just gonna
And you're
ask. So
kind of
Jeannie, my wife's best friend has MS and got diagnosed at the age of later 20s or something like that. And I have multiple questions, but like one is like, how did you mentally handle it? And the kind of like the follow up question, real quick, is like, I can't imagine back then what research was available compared to
right,
now, right? So I mean, like the gap in like what you probably must have like known or unknown of what you were dealing with. I mean, how did you
right.
process it?
Well, I just went to a really dark place. It was sort of like, shit, I'm gonna end up really badly. I'm not even gonna be able to walk. I just did this number on myself. And so I worked with a therapist, somebody, I can't remember how I found her, but it was somebody who dealt with women, with people who had chronic diseases, because it's a
Mm,
special kind of a thing. And it was just really simple stuff like, you're just assuming that it's going to go one way. And she said, that's not necessarily going to happen.
mm,
And it was like, oh, and then it just sort of broke it for me. And it was like, okay, maybe I will have issues, but it's not a done deal.
mhm.
And as it turned out, I had that first, they're called exacerbations. And then 5 years later, I had the second one, and I was at the bank then as well.
Okay.
And that's all I ever had.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, when you talk about like, and I don't struggle with any chronic or or consistent diseases, but like I got family members and I know people that have, and like just that battle of enjoying the present, future's more uncertain than everybody else, because I think a lot of times we think we can control way more than we actually can, and we take a lot of the present for granted. And so I don't know if that
Yeah.
had any impact on like your decision making or like how you're reviewing what you wanted to do.
Well, what I did, I kept it a complete secret because I thought, oh man, this is going to impact me. People, I will not get promotions.
Uh,
I won't be able to do stuff because people will assume that I'm sick. So I just kept it a secret. I kept it a secret for 9 years
oh
until I
wow,
left.
so that must have been lonely.
That's not a really healthy way to handle it, is it?
I was just gonna say that must have been lonely. I mean, like I don't know if you had anybody that you were leaning on talking to about that.
Well, I had the people who were closest to me, my friends and my partners and stuff, they would know. But people at work, that was not, I
Hmm.
didn't share that with them.
So at 9 years at the bank, what was the like? How did you define success at the bank? And like, when did you
Okay,
start figure? Did you feel trapped or not progressing, or what started feeling off?
sure. So I did a lot of jobs there. First of all, I mentioned that the president, and then he became the CEO, he really liked me. He could mentor. I would do projects that he wanted to have done. I was really good at, he'd say, I don't know what's going on in this area. Can you go in there and figure it
All
out?
fun.
And that's exactly the kind of problem I love.
Very chaotic, not sure. That's where creativity and math, right?
Big and we don't know the edges of this thing. And so I did a number of things like that. But anyway, I did a number of jobs. I did the strategic planning job. Then I did an internal kind of cash management, which was like float management for the bank.
Is this the whole Coldwell Banker, or is this just one division at that time? Was that
No, this was a corporate. This
okay?
was the
Wow.
old U.S. Bank.
Oh,
Yeah.
US Bank. I'm sorry, I missed
No,
that connection. Yeah, yeah.
it's U.S. Bank,
Okay,
right?
got it. Yeah,
No,
yeah,
this is First Bank. This is the big bank
yeah,
in
yeah.
town.
Wow. Yeah, 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 yeah. Got it. Sorry, missed the connection. Yep.
And I did that. And then I got talked into doing, in fact, it was from the damned HR guy. And he said, oh, I know you can do this job. You really can do anything. And it was to run the back office for the capital markets trading area. There is no worse match for me. I have no eye for detail. I hate it. And I failed.
How long did it take you to, like, how long were you doing it?
I think I was in that position for probably a year and 3/4. And then it was pretty evident this was not a good fit. And luckily, I knew the CEO who could save my ass. But what it did to me, it was sort of like, it was a real failure. It's the first real failure I had. And that was really tough. And it took me about a year to get through that.
I was gonna say, how did you process that failure? And like, what did you do to get your head back on your shoulders?
Well, I just, I just got really down on myself. And, I did a lot of talking through. And then I could talk to Dennis. Dennis Evans was the guy's name. You might even remember him. I could talk to him a little bit about it, but he wasn't really that kind of mentor. He was more, giving you meaningful work and stuff like that. In fact, I remember one time going to him. This is really kind of a poignant thing. I'd gone in for some evaluation for management, to do management jobs. And I remember I was criticized because I reacted too quickly to a situation, thought that I knew the answer. And I talked to him about it. And he said to me, "Oh, no." He said, "What you do is you very quickly come up with a hypothesis and then you go and figure it out." And it was like, that was so important for me to hear.
And
It was another way of reading what the management person had said.
Interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, kind of like the same way that you kind of shifted the narrative on MS. Like, hey, there's a different way we can look at this. It doesn't have to be the downside. Yeah. Interesting. Have you taken the Colby test before? That's the person.
I haven't done that one. I know that's what Anna does, and I should probably do that.
I would imagine you're a quick start. I'm the same way, where it's like ready, like fire amp. It's like, I think I have an idea. Let's go figure out if it's the right idea fast, and then we can move on. So, did that give you any gold nuggets of lessons learned out of why you failed at the trading position?
Yeah, I did. It did. I mean, steady. If there's a regular process that's already in place and the job is to simply follow it, that is not the job for me.
I actually just had a stomach ache from you saying that as well. So we must have something similar. Yeah, that's awesome. What did you say? When there's no edges to it? I love how you worded that.
Yeah, I need edges. I just need, to be able to move on into new territory or new, Anyway, so I did that. And then, and then the last job that I did there is I ran their discount brokerage. And that was actually a good job for me. I was independent. It was my own thing. You had to be licensed and you got all the registrations, I even forget what they are now. And so I did that. And it was actually not bad training for the next thing I was going to do, which was start Mindware. And that is, when I ran out of money, I could call the treasurer's office and they'd put money in my account.
Well, isn't that handy? Isn't right?
That was sweet.
So how long did you do that then?
I was in that job for that might have been a couple of years. I actually because I did like kind of 1.5 to 2 year stints as I moved through there. I had 4 different jobs. So, and it was great because it was a great cross section of what you do in a bank.
So then where is it that led you to start entertaining the idea of starting your own business, or did it pop? Okay. Like, what was a triggering event that led to that?
So I decided to quit the bank. That was not, I'm 39 years old. There's something that happens then. And the way I always talk about it, it's all columns and rows. There's too many columns and rows, and I need more creativity. I need to be able to use different kinds of business skills. And in fact, as it turned out, I mean, I was a really good merchant. I can figure out what other people want to buy. That was something I was good at, which is a different kind of skill. It's still a business skill. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so I took off 6 months, which was really, really hard to take off that much time, and worked with somebody.
I was just going to a clarifying question. So you quit your corporate stable job at the age of 39 your parents came from the Great Depression, and your dad, and then you took 6 months off. How was that selling that to to your dad? I'm assuming
Well,
this is an insert mom at this point.
yeah, right. I wasn't sharing a whole lot of stuff with him at that point until I landed. But once I landed, it was really even hard for them to understand what I was doing. Probably less so with my mom, but anyway, yeah, that was a tough time. So it was 6 months, and I remember working with this counselor who helps you figure out what to do, and I would start doing volunteer stuff, and he said, "No, I don't want you to do volunteer stuff. I want you to sit still, and stay where you are, and just stay with the discomfort." And then we started doing some testing, and one of the things that came out was, I still remember this woman, again, sitting across the table from me saying, "I cannot believe that you survived for 9 years in a corporation."
Why did she say that? What was the reasoning?
She said, "You have this," how did she put it? She said, "You have these creative impulses that are just all over the place." And she said, "It's just remarkable to me that you did that." And she said, "No," she said, and I said, "Does that mean I should be an entrepreneur?" And she said, "Yeah, that would be a good choice for you."
So you actually brought it up to her? Like, so did you know that?
I'm trying to remember if I would use a word like entrepreneur. I don't think I don't even know if it was in vogue then.
Well, and actually the good, interesting choice of words, because I was talking to someone else. I can't remember, Jeannie, who it was. And they were like, this is before entrepreneurship was cool. And I was like, really? Like, I mean, and again, this is just, it's a pure age thing. Like my dad, beat into me, like, you can do whatever you want, because it was sales that led to entrepreneurship. But that was 20 years ago. You throw on decades, and I'm assuming being a woman must have been way harder as well. So it's like the fact that it was not a thing that people would lead you to, it was more of like the defective almost people, or I don't know exactly what the narrative was, but interesting that was the observation of you. And that
I don't think I know, I'm sure I didn't use the word entrepreneur. I went out and I started looking then, and I looked at some franchises.
Okay.
And I was told that would probably not be the best fit for me either. I've never liked being told what to do. That's sort of it.
I love it. So wait, those edges are a little too small and a little too defined, right?
But I did that, and then just started thinking, and I was working with a really good counselor who just dug deep, and it's like, what is really important to you? And one of the things that really emerged is that having that health issue was just a shot through my whole life. That was a big deal. And I needed to deal with that. I needed to accept it and think about it. And so I started looking at, maybe sort of a health related business. And what I landed on was this, what I called a creativity business. It was Mindware. And it was this, and the whole idea was that corporate dropouts would come. It was just a consumer thing. Corporate dropouts, just like me, would come and buy these interesting things like puzzles and games and books. And well, not one person like that walked in the door, except for my very good friend now, Dan Wallace. He's the only one who walked through the door. We're still friends today. And but the people who came in were kids, parents, teachers. All of these people who were interested in learning. And so I started honing the collection, and more went into toys.
So let me pause you for a sec. So did you buy the business? Did you start?
I started it.
You started it. And so when you say walk through the door, did it start just as retail and you bought a bunch of inventory, and that was kind of the idea that
I selected the inventory, decided on a name, did all that fun stuff, worked with somebody to design the store with me.
Nice.
And, I didn't mention, I also got married that same year. At age 39, I quit my job and I got married, and I started a business.
Shake it all up. Yeah. It was too static. Let's just shake it all up. Right. So,
but I really sound nuts, don't I?
If just to reciprocate, we sold the business, we were doing in vitro, and I bought our house. So I was like, oh, what the hell? Why not? Megan's like, can you just give me a baby or babies? So did you did you start it up on a credit card? Did you have some cash? Did you borrow some
No,
money?
I did. Well, okay. So I got married. So the guy that I married, he also was a banker, and he's like an investment banker type. He builds models. He's the guy who did what your firm does,
I love it. So actually, instead of guessing, you had a little bit
right?
of structure behind it.
Right.
It's a good
And
thing.
I knew I knew what I wanted to see and what I needed to know, and he could build the models for me.
Nice,
So it was a
nice.
great combination. He was also he was a brutal mentor, I'll tell you that. But anyway, and that's also, as you know, that's a good thing for me. If somebody tells me no, you're really bankrupt, and I'll cry for a little bit, and then it's like, okay, I'm going to fix this.
Yes, challenge
Um,
accepted.
anyway, so where did I start?
So you're talking about then
So
that
the concept, it was this creativity store, and I knew the kinds of products that I wanted to do, and I started with this store. It was down in Light and Uptown at
That's
that
awesome.
point, and I was working the store, and then I started hiring a couple people, and yeah, and then it grew from there. It just grew every single year. It grew.
So what did you had said that you had a knack for figuring out what people wanted to buy. So how were you processing and synthesizing the things that you were seeing in your store, and then how did you take action
Okay,
on that?
well, that's it. That's the whole thing, is observing. It's whether they're in the store and you can see what they're doing. You can talk to them a little bit, but mostly it's from watching them. I also would go to a lot of conferences, especially teacher conferences. They were fascinating to watch.
I bet.
Fascinating. The big buyers were math teachers and teachers of the gifted.
Hmm.
And so, like, the math teachers would know exactly what they'd want. They'd walk in, and most they would ask another teacher. And we'd go to these huge national math conferences because a lot of the products, they were like puzzles and building
Mm-hmm.
toys and all of that sort of. And then, but the teachers of the gifted were very talkative. They always wore big clothes, and they'd want to talk. They wouldn't take advice from me. They'd take it from another teacher. So we had those two kinds of markets, but the market that we were the expert in was the parent market. They would listen to us. And that's what I did. The catalog, that was the direct marketing, direct to consumer marketing. I was the expert for them. They wanted somebody to tell them what to buy,
Hmm.
or the grandparents, somebody who needed an expert, and we could do that. So that was the voice we used in the catalog. And it was all print catalog at that point, no
I was just
internet.
gonna say, I'm just picturing, remember, like around Christmas time when all the catalogs come out, and we've got some direct to consumer clients too, and it's still a thing. I mean, there's still people going out there doing that. And Jeannie, what did that do for, like, maybe give us a couple benchmarks of like the growth of, like, over the
Oh,
course
sure.
of time? I'm just kind of curious, like, did the catalog take it off? Was it mainly retail and then drop ship, or how were you growing?
I started in the retail, and we did a couple of different distribution. Now we'll talk about hard business. I had started with the retail store, so people were just walking in the door. I lasted there for a year and a half. It was just crazy. I think that's opening a store on the street and expecting that people are going to come to you and buy this kind of stuff was pretty silly. So I closed it and moved out to sort of a showroom warehouse
Okay.
because I was already starting with the catalog
Okay.
stuff.
Got it.
So I needed to have a warehouse. And that's when I got the loading dock.
Wasn't that at the presentation that we were at recently, and our
Well,
mutual friend was like, "I got a loading dock, so I'm a real business owner," and you I think you started laughing right next to me.
I did.
Got it.
I was like, it's like you're a real adult, you're a business person now. You've got a loading dock.
I think she actually said, "I got a loading dock and a forklift," so yay me.
She did me one.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I did that, and then started building the catalog more, buying more for the catalog, and focusing on the catalog. But what I also started doing were these kiosks. They're called pop-ups now,
Okay.
but a kiosk business where I would go out at the holiday time, November, December especially. I'd go into malls and set up, rent space,
Okay.
and hire a manager for the area. I expanded this for 3 years, and then I took the big fall.
Well, I was just saying,
So
before
I
we get to,
started.
I'm curious, like, and maybe this is leading to the big fall because I'm not exactly sure what's in that story. Is that as you're growing, how were you managing the supply and demand? It's like, I mean, you go from retail to then all of a sudden people are buying out of the catalog. How were you managing? Like, where were you getting the games and everything? Were you manufacturing them, or did you have
Oh,
suppliers?
no, we weren't doing that yet.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
one of the outcomes of this great fall, is that's where we went to then. But it was, no, I was basically, all I was doing was buying stuff that other people made and selling it.
Got it. Okay.
Now, I had a really good eye and I knew what people wanted to buy, and I knew how to hire people who knew how to do that.
Got it. Okay.
So we had a pretty strong center. So we always had this nice brand and people could depend on it.
That's super interesting that you said that you could hire people that knew that too, because I have come across a lot of business owners, Jeannie, where like the business models in like finding like used cars where they're like, I've got someone I know that they buy like 100 cars a month, but they are like convinced that they could never find someone else to find the buy as good as them.
Oh.
Look at your smile. I love it. And then this is a shout out to my really, really, really good buddy from college who's got a rental business who also has this self narrative that he's the only person on the planet that can figure out how to get the best deal off of Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, as it turned out, I wasn't the best at anything except the thing that I was really good at, and you're going to enjoy this. It was the intentional growth.
I love it.
Every damn year. I mean, I held it. I had employees who actually thanked me for how I grew that company because it was a reasonable rate of growth. It was somewhere between I actually looked through it, between like 23 and 50% every year. Every damn year it grew.
Wow.
Now the profits were another thing, you know?
Yeah.
And it took a while because I was doing such slow growth, and you really need to have some real size in order for those profits to just drop to the bottom line.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then that's what really started happening. And that's when I sold it.
So let's, I want to pull that thread a little bit as far as then the profits come and the sustainable growth rate, but let's go maybe to the what'd you call it? What'd you label the learning?
The big fall.
The big fall. Yes. Why don't you
let me describe my big fall, because that was the big thing. Okay. So I said we had 3 of those little pop-up stores the first year. Then I went to about 11 and I started spreading out. I went down to Des Moines, into Wisconsin, to Colorado. And then it went well that year as well. So then I did it even further. I went out, I had 23 of them. I was as far east as Cleveland and as far west as Colorado Springs.
Okay.
What I do is I go into a town, I'd assess the shopping centers and decide which ones I wanted to be in. And then I do the deals with them, and then I'd hire a manager for that town to manage those 3.
Wow.
And then that person would hire the other people. And my husband, who, is this sort of this IT model building, we went out and bought all these old cash registers and programmed them. And he did. And so we would have downloads every night. So we knew what was selling in these places.
Oh, that's awesome.
I mean, it was so funny. It wasn't funny.
But if you like data and you like to figure out what's in the minds of people, no pun intended with your business, it's like, it's like a kid in a candy store. It's like, oh my God.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So we did that. And that third year, which was 1995, was the year that the market got a little softer. And I was in all these malls everywhere. I had nothing proprietary. I was only selling other people's products in the middle of a shopping mall. People began to see my success. They just walk out and see what I sold. I mean, I was like a sitting duck.
Yeah, like, hey, look at me. Here's my business plan right here. That's fascinating.
And so it was like, this. So I ended the year with a ton of inventory that I had to ship all back to Minneapolis. Tons of bills with those suppliers. Anyway, it was really sad. Really sad.
How did you and your husband have that conversation about the model? Like, what was the dialogue around what happened? Like, the model didn't show it because, like I guess the underlying is like, hey, you can build this model, but you kind of have to sync it up with reality. So how were you guys?
He wasn't really interested, honestly, in the business. He's more interested in like functional areas where he can really, like, he would select the catalog system, or he would work with the IT, or setting up the cash. But that's kind of stuff he
Got
loved to do, which is all the stuff I don't know, have a clue about.
it.
So it was perfect. But no, so I came back and it was, I had to call all the suppliers.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing that happened is I lost my line of credit. I had a small line of credit. And I lost that. And that was when I really had to turn into really working that teacher business, because those are receivables and those are damn good receivables. And you can bank them. You can get credit.
Mm-hmm.
You can get a line of credit. So that's what would get me through the rough spots. And then I had to call all those people and tell them, this is my plan. I'm going to do this. And they accepted it. And in fact, I did. I paid them back. And boy, did that help me in building the company after that. But anyway, so then
in what way though? Like what about your mindset?
I remember then going to Toy Fair and meeting up with some of those suppliers, and they would say, and I go in, because every year I try to get a better deal, just kind of eke away to really work on margins. And I mean, they would say to me, yeah, we'll definitely, or I'd ask for 90 days credit or something like that, and they would give it to me. And it would be, yeah, we trust you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was just, that was really when I learned that thing about your reputation and your word. I mean, there is nothing that is more important.
What's Buffett's whole deal? Like you can sell your reputation for $1 and you can't buy it back for $1 billion or something ridiculous like that. And it's so true.
Yeah.
And it's interesting about the whole stakeholders that you're talking about. Conscious capitalism, I'm a big fan of it. And like I think over the last 3 years, Jeanne, you've probably watched a lot of business owners where their relationship with their suppliers and vendors and bankers and lenders and commercial real estate, whatever it is, all came right out to light based on however they've treated people for a long time. So a really cool story.
No, it's your employees. You better damn well pay them. And your suppliers, you better well treat them with respect and do what you say you're going to do. So, yeah. Anyway, so I went through the year, and of course there's, waiting for Christmas season, holiday season again. I needed capital because I wasn't banked anymore. And my husband was not about to put in any money. And
did you guys talk about
he
it?
thought I was crazy. Well, he always sort of thought I was crazy. He wasn't a risk taker in the same way I was. And I am a little crazy. I mean, I own that.
We're all entrepreneurs. I mean,
yeah, we are.
I was going to say, if you have to be a little batshit crazy to do what we're doing, because otherwise it'd be a hell of a lot easier just to go get a job and a nice paycheck and no responsibilities.
Yeah.
Outside, I shouldn't say no responsibilities, because that's not what I meant for corporate executives, but you know what I mean? Like as far as like all the additional personal guarantees and payroll.
Oh God, yeah. So what I did is, because I worked at the bank, I had a 401k. And I had some money in there because I'd worked 9 years at, pretty reasonable pay. And so what I decided to do, I did the research, and I could take out for 60 days money. And if I got it paid back, then there would not be a penalty. And boy, you should have heard my friends on this. I mean, it was like, you're just crazy. You're absolutely crazy. You're risking everything. And for me, it was like, first of all, I believe there's been demand for this thing every damn year. Every single year I've been in business, and it's growing, at a really nice rate every year. I said, the demand is there. And then it was, I got 60 days, and they have to pay the postage, on the barrelhead. No credit with the post office. And so in order to mail my catalogs out that year, I had to do it. So I did it.
Wow.
That's what I call betting the farm.
That is the definition of the today's farm for most people.
And I did it, and I won. It worked. It worked.
Which is amazing. And when you were in the process of making that decision, Jeanne, was there mainly people telling you that's crazy? Or like what gave you, outside of like you having the intuition, was there any voice or any experience that you're like, hey, this is going to be a calculated bet?
Yeah. I think one thing, and this is pretty practical, I was 45 years old. It's like, I'm 45 years old, for God's sake. I can come back if this doesn't work. I can get a job.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to die from this. I was scared shitless. I mean, there's no doubt
Mhm,
about it.
mhm.
And I expressed that to some of my closest friends. I was very, very, very scared.
But like you had said something interesting though. You're scared shitless in like probably the first world scared shitless, but you have did your whole journey with MS have anything when you because you said like I'm not dying like it did that lend its insight into kind of how you viewed the weight of the
That's a
decision
really interesting question, Ryan. I hadn't really thought about that. I
because you
hadn't
very
really thought about
because you
that.
very clearly were like I'm not dying or anything like this, but I was scared shitless. I mean, so like to what degree of
Yeah.
scare? Because I think a lot of people it's
Wow.
almost the I mean, losing your failing at entrepreneurship, I think can people in today's world with the perception and ego and what we all put out there could almost probably feel like death to most people.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
very fascinating. So when you said it worked, so what happened that holiday season? Did you pay it back within the 60 days?
Yeah. I paid it back. I got that done. I paid all my vendors back. And then I got a line. I mean, I really started building the teacher business. But the main thing that I did is we started making our own products then. Instead of buying other people's products, we could design, we could bring in inventors or we could design them. Because I had a really good staff by then who knew how to do that and could work on it.
So
And then I started adding people,
like
managers.
that's a lot of big changes after you just came out from underneath that. So maybe give us a little bit of a peer into like what was your mindset and intentions when you decided to like start manufacturing. I don't know if you had like a certain like view on the growth rate. And I mean, here's what I'm trying to say, Jeannie, is like, you probably went in like not doing this again, not doing that again, but I'm going to probably try these things. Like, how did you go in and like, what was your intentions at that point with the business?
Well, the thing is, creating our own, starting to depend more on our own products would do two things. It would it's a defensive
Mm-hmm,
strategy.
mm-hmm.
I'm not going to get picked off. And they were also way more
Ah, okay. Yeah.
profitable. We were doing, I mean, there were some products that we were doing. We do these little puzzle books, like deductive or inductive puzzle books. Remember, these are learning toys.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we could get an 80% margin on them. They'd have a color cover. We'd sell them for $12.95. Glenn Taylor's company in southern Minnesota would print them up. He'd store them. I
That's
mean, it
awesome.
was, yeah. So we had some stuff like that.
So were you guys
That was
doing
kind of,
contract manufacturing, or were you like actually buying the equipment, having the buildings, all that kind of stuff? Because yeah, there might be more margin, but like, was it like
oh, you
okay,
mean, oh, okay. You're talking about the three, no. So the printing, we go to the printer. No, we would design the stuff. We'd
okay?
have it made in China. So we would work with people. We work with a lot of creative types to get the product, including the inventor of some of the games. Are you familiar with Quirkle?
I've heard of it. Yeah,
Okay.
I've never
That
played
was
it
the
though.
last big game that we did. That was the biggest game we ever did. That was the last
Oh
game.
no way! That's
It was the last
awesome.
game we did when I was there.
That's awesome. I've not
Yeah.
now.
Okay.
I'm gonna have to go pick it up because I definitely have seen the box. So
It's a great game.
oh my gosh! So like are you bringing designers on staff then, or you're probably doing what I mean
Oh,
like
no, those were all pretty. I had a really good product person that I hired, a young woman from the University of Minnesota out of the architecture school,
hmm.
extremely creative. And one other person who was also very creative and very good at that. So I was good at hiring creatives. I'm good at hiring them and good at working with them to keep them motivated.
So what was the oh wait, how like what was the culture like? What was the like when you wait
Oh, good.
when you showed up to the business and you're like you got these people, you're doing this stuff. So what was the culture like and what was the vision you were painting for everybody?
Okay, for the employees. Okay, so the deal was, I mean, we had some rules. Actually, I've shared this one with Anna. We're going to create these products, and we are never going to copy what somebody else does. That is not the business we are in. We're creative, and we're going to lead. And also that design is important, and children need to be seeing good design. It's not. There's so much trashy stuff that's out there. So we had things like that.
I'm laughing
And
because I got a bunch of that trashy stuff in my house because I got the kids.
it's all over. I mean, it's rampant. Um, but those are kind of the values. But the culture thing, that is interesting because I had a practice at the end of every year. including the 5 years before at the very beginning, where whoever was working there, we would sit down and we would go through and talk about what happened that year, what worked well, and but mostly what didn't. And there was no blame. Nobody got to blame. No, that was not the point. But we wanted to get everything on the table. So it was this sort of process that we went through every year.
Oh,
And
that's
then we
awesome.
take that and then move forward with that. So that was a really good practice. I think that was the best practice that I set up there.
So how do you like, what did you do, Jeannie, that like instills the, trying to think of the word that like so many people have a hard time of like saying, hey, there is no blame, but you and I both know that there's cultures where they say that and they're totally like, it's not inserted into the culture where like, people still hide stuff. So like, what did you do to keep that fluid conversation going where people knew that they weren't going to be blamed?
Okay. Well, one thing is, first of all, we didn't talk about it as failures. We talked about learnings. That was the language. And that's what I'm trying to get Anna to talk about.
I love it. Because if you think about it, if you just applied everything you're just talking about to the games that you sold, it's like you don't fail at a puzzle. You just keep trying until you figure the damn thing out, right?
Right.
Super interesting. What was
in fact, I always say I've never learned from a success, to be perfectly honest. But man, I learn every time I fail. I learn something.
Man, I had one of those recently when I just looked at my wife. I'm like, holy shit, have I learned a lot recently? I'm just gonna soak in it right now. It's just very real. Not doing those things again. So what was your goal with the business? So if you got the people, you got what you're doing. Yeah.
All right. So I think that this is part of the reason I wanted to talk about it like this, because the way I ran it was that it was very orderly. It was never, and everybody knew what we were doing. It was more that. And what happened is that I got an offer. Somebody came in and said, I'd be really interested in buying this company. And they made me an offer. And I was like, whoa, you mean this would be worth that much? And so I went and got a valuation. And it was worth a lot more than that.
And the valuation said that?
The valuation said that, yeah. So that was kind of that was when I really started thinking. No, it really was a little bit prior to that, because we had a series. We reached a certain point, and we talked about the ad spend in that wonderful session. That's the name of the game in direct to consumer when you're doing that. It's what does it cost you to acquire the customer, to keep that customer? And yeah, we got to a point, we did a turnaround when that ad spend went way down. And that was when things really started falling to the bottom line. It was like I finally got there.
What was the first time that you noticed that? Did you pull up your financials and go, huh? Or like, what was like, how did like?
Oh yeah, it was like, geez, look at this.
I love it.
It was just, it is that thing with entrepreneurs. We go along and we say, oh, I believe this, I believe in it. And then it happens. And like, my God, I really did it.
Oh, Judy, I said the amount of years Megan and I have a date night every Thursday. The amount of years at that date night, I'm like, trust me, just trust me. It's going to work. And then like, it was like a couple of years ago, I was like, hey, look at this. And she's like, well, you always said it was going to work. I'm like, I had no effing idea if it was actually going to work.
Right.
She's like, well, that's encouraging. I'm like, I don't know. Just like, I believed it, but that's awesome.
But it's so funny. It's so funny.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, when I did the Great Fall, we applied then the next year. I applied for the Small Business Person of the Year and I won it.
Oh, cool.
And that really gained me, PR in the city. And it just gained so much confidence from that. It was like, God, I do know how to do this.
I just some reason want to print that off and print off the sale PR release and send it to that mortgage guy that you met like years and years ago. What right do you have, Jeannie? I'll tell you what.
Right, you're right.
Oh, that's awesome. So like, when you got that valuation out of the blue offer, like, I think that's an interesting point, because like a lot of times, you and I have talked a lot, entrepreneurs don't understand the value. So they don't have a baseline of like, I don't know if it's worth this. So like, when you, with that information, what did you do with it? With the knowledge of you have someone that's interested, you have a valuation that's proving that this company's worth something. What did that do to your mindset and your decision making? Like, how did you take that and move forward?
Oh, then it was, I really need to, because, to be honest, and I'm sure you've been at this point too, where you get to a point, and frankly, every year that it got bigger at Christmas time, it was riskier because any year I could be blown out of the water. And I was beginning to feel that really acutely.
Mm.
The first year I was in business was the year of the Gulf War, my very first year in business. And I remember that January, one day, only one person walked into my store, and it was to return something.
Wrong direction. Nope. Go back out. No.
So I knew what could happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, this is just too risky. I've got too much going on here. I want to get out of this and monetize some of this. So that was, to me, that was really the thing that just kept weighing on me more and more. So I was very happy when, to see this kind of stuff because the time was right.
So did you actually entertain that out of the blue offer and keep them in the line, or did you?
No, it was too low.
Okay, so did you? So between that out of the blue offer and the valuation, and when you sold, what was the time frame in between there?
Let's see. I probably sold then within a couple of years.
So what did you do?
I knew that I was on that path, and I had to get everything lined up with who, who was going to sell it. And I did. You asked the question about, there was a guy in the industry. There are several people in that industry, in that catalog industry, and I knew them. And so it was a matter of talking with them and just finding out what the deal is and how I wanted to go about it. Now, this is where I want to talk about what happened with their session with those guys and what they did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's hear it.
Well, I decided on how much money I wanted for it. I said, this is the minimum amount of money that I'll take for this.
Mm-hmm.
And just out of the blue. And I said, and I don't want to do a big deal where we put it out there to everybody in the world. I'd really like to have it a more, select group.
Mm-hmm.
And I also wanted to see a range. So there were a couple of private equity. There was another large corporate catalog company out of Colorado. There was a family-owned company out of Indiana. And then there was an individual, a very wealthy couple, and he came from the industry. And so those were the ones that we had to look at. And each one of them, they all agreed on the pricing and stuff. And so each one of them, was maybe the heads up, it wasn't the right way to do it.
Why do you say that? What leads you to say that?
Well, if they all were so readily agreed to it, maybe it was. But I wasn't thinking like that then. It was sort of like, I wanna move on. It's time for me to move on. And so they came into town one by one, and I had a good staff by then.
How many team members did you have at that point?
Well, I had an operations guy. They were all at the professional level. I had an operations guy. I had an IT guy, my merchandising people and new product people. I had somebody who was heading wholesale, which was just beginning to really start to get some steam because we had enough products then. And then, who's the other one? Oh, my marketing guy. My most important person was and what marketing is in this kind of an industry, it's really this analytical, statistical stuff. You buy lists, you figure out who you're going to mail to, how many times. And I remember the woman that was counseling me on how to hire people, because I actually was not very good at it from the beginning, but she gave me some tools and really helped me. And she was the one who told me that this guy would drive you nuts because he's highly detailed. Of course, he's an analyst. And in fact, I knew he was the right guy. And we are still friends today. There's no way I could have built that company without him.
Wow, that's an awesome shout out. And what were some of the things that person told you about hiring that changed how you went about it?
She sort of, she's an HR type, and they always have it was the DISC instrument that we were using. And we got really familiar with it, and I got I could understand it, and I would really help me. There were people that I needed to have in place for operations or different positions where they really were completely different from me, and I needed to understand that, and that's where it was really, really helpful.
Oh, that's awesome. I don't know if I've ever told you the story, Jeannie, but it's just like comical that we have a fractional CFO business. And 10 years ago, when my dad and I failed 3 times at hiring CFOs, it was like, do we want to drink beer and go fishing with them? Like, don't hire a CFO on that criteria. And everybody listening in, our recruiting process is a little bit more strict at this point than, like, hey, you drink a Busch Light or a premium or something like that, and you're good to go.
It's the same deal. You're right. It was just stupid.
Like, wait a second. It doesn't matter if I like you or not. I mean, I need to like you, but like, you need to be able to do the job I'm hiring you for. Oh, that's awesome.
That's why it's just so interesting now to talk to young people or people who are running their companies who are trying to find people for positions, because it's so hard. When somebody really likes you and your company and you really like them, it's hard to resist.
It's so true, isn't it? So, going back to like when you had these buyers that are lined up, there are a lot like private equity, family office, corporate, wealthy individual, a lot of the stuff that we cover in some of the exit options too, which is interesting. They probably all had different visions for the business. So how were you matching up or reconciling the price people were willing to pay and the terms with what they were going to do with the business and what you wanted with the business long term?
Let me see. Let me just think back through again. What we did, and this is sort of different because I brought my staff in. I really brought them into this process. They did the stand-up presentation for their area. Each one of them stood up and did their presentation.
What got you to do that and the courage to do that versus keep it in secret?
Well, first of all, they're really good and they're really bought in, and they want,
yeah, what a concept, right? But there's risk of people getting freaked out and leaving. So how did you?
They didn't. Not one of them. And we practiced, and so I would do a part, and then each one of them would stand up and do a section. And I wanted them to meet these people, to get a sense for who these people were. And then I think this is the best thing I ever did is in one of our final meetings, I said, okay, we got all these guys now. I am going to make the final decision, but I want to know who you think we should choose. And I wanted to hear their thinking. And that was really interesting. It was really interesting.
Did you have a criteria? So before you continue, like decision-making criteria, like did you have a criteria of what's important for you? And then how were you vetting out what people were saying? Because what if what they were saying wasn't important to you or to the long-term goals? So how were you?
Well, they knew that it would be my decision in the end.
Okay.
But I wanted to hear what their opinions were. And I respected each one of these people in the room. So I really wanted to hear, and I wanted to keep them. I wanted them to stay at Mindware. It didn't work out, all that well in the end. But anyway, so I heard from them. There was only one of them who wanted to get somebody who could come in with more capital. It was the IT guy. That we want to bring in somebody with more capital, because all of the others really wanted to keep that entrepreneurial spirit.
Okay.
That was the most important thing to them. And the wealthy couple came out at the top of that, and they also had an all-cash deal.
Got it. So what about, so you said it all didn't work out that well in the end, and you chuckled to yourself. So what do you mean by that?
Well, let's see, what did I mean by that? Well, it was the couple that I chose. He was British, and I ended up really not liking him very much. He's very charming at the front end, as so many Brits can be. So we struggled, and it hurt the company. The company actually was on a little bit of a seesaw for about 3 years, and I did not behave well. And it was, I had to stay on. Part of the deal is I had to stay on.
I was going to say, so you said all cash, but did you sell 100% of it, or is it all cash for a portion?
I sold 75%.
So you guys are, not only you're at odds personality wise, but you're tied together with a huge chunk of equity that's reliant on each other.
we didn't behave well. And but what happened then is the next year was still pretty much in line. I sold at the end of 2003. 2004 was pretty much in line, and that was a great year. It was the following year when it started falling apart. And
was there certain things like decisions about how to grow, reinvest, or if things got tight, like what started?
How much to mail, how much inventory to have, anything.
So wait, I think I heard a couple times throughout this interview, I don't like being told what to do. I don't know, like maybe there's something there, like.
I know. I admitted it. I even admitted then I did not behave well. But what happened is by then that second year, because we had a bad year, and I went in and I talked to Martin and I said, Martin, every single area went bad. I said, we can't blame it on any one of these managers. The only way that can happen is when the top to take accountability for it.
Oh, good for you.
So he did. He agreed. So we walked out, and that was our big debrief.
Wow.
And we held that responsibility and said, we screwed up.
Good for you guys.
This has not gone well, and we're going to turn this around. I mean, to me, that was the only way out. It's the only way I can operate. It's that sort of, call it what it is.
Yeah, you're like, let's throw it all out there and deal with it, right?
Call it what it is. And that's the only way you can deal with it. And so we did. And then it got better, and I started behaving better. And one mistake I made is I picked a bad attorney. I had come from corporate. I knew all of these big firms. So I picked an attorney from a big firm. Well, they don't know anything about entrepreneurs and what life is like if you have to stay on. And so it was pretty miserable.
And was it?
But that was my fault. That was my call. And
what in the legal docs what in the legal docs resulted in
that
you feeling
I had no out. There was no out.
You actually had to have a physical job there in order to keep your equity. Oh, bummer. Oh, so what, after you guys had that full debrief, like, did you, I can only imagine, I'm just projecting onto you, but like, show me the light, show me the light at the end of the tunnel. Like, was there like a target, a timeline, or an exit in mind, or was it more
for me? Well, I had to stay. I mean, I had so many years that I had to be there, and it was way too long. And then the other thing is, I had a much less to do, and so I didn't get to be involved in all the parts of the business, and it really, and this was like he had been a marketing guy in a big firm, so he was really good at the marketing side. But there's a lot more to do than that.
What was it like? What was it like for you, Jeanne, knowing how things should run, how to make things better, and not being able to?
It was hell. Those are the worst 4 years of my work life, bar none.
Yeah.
So I was ready to get out of there.
How did you cope with it mentally while you're going
Well,
through?
I finally did. I just had to make some peace with it, and I had to stop, just play with the team. That's what my job was, and I just had to do that. And I was just imagining what I was going to be able to do next.
So was it the 4 years? So you said 4 years. Was that the employment contract? Was there a trigger where he buys you out of your extra 25%, or like how did that equity get monetized?
Yeah, whatever it is in that final year. So it was 2003. Actually, it was the end of 2008. That would be the settlement, whatever it was that year, and it was a terrible year. Oh. So there was almost nothing left. They made some other big mistake that year, and anyway.
So you had to stay for 4.5 years, and you didn't get the equity that.
And I didn't get anything. That's true.
I just want to drop the big, huge F-bomb on. That's the only word that I can think of right now.
But I walked away with plenty, man. What I've really learned is that I am way better at earning money, making money than I am at spending it. Spending it is not, it's just not, having been raised the way I was raised, it's sort of, we used to sit around the table or the dinner table and talk about why we couldn't get stuff. If somebody wanted to have something, and then my dad, who taught each of us how to budget when we were in fourth grade.
Oh my gosh. You're like, can you imagine how many people could benefit from that kind of mentality right now?
Yes.
Right?
And we talked about money.
Mm-hmm.
It was not a taboo subject in our house. It was great.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
What was it like for so did you just quit then, and obviously you settled up with whatever that little equity was? I mean, what did your team have
Yeah.
to say? Like, did they stay, and like, what was the culture like?
Well, by then, a couple people had left. Yeah, there were some people that were really, really struggling there. The marketing guy was really struggling. And my other product guy, another really big product guy who was heading the wholesale business, was really struggling, and they both left. And that's a pretty big hole
Oh,
between those two.
what was it like watching your baby kind of get frayed and dismantled like that?
It was really hard. It was really, really hard. I'd be really cautious about that stuff.
Any words for, and I don't want to try and pretend that there's something monumental that you would have done differently, because I get asked that all the time, Jeannie, and it's more like any words for people as they have big decisions like that in front of them, like, because I'm trying to articulate it for people, Jeannie, like there's going to be a number, but then there's going to be what happens with the business and the culture afterwards. And somehow people need to get clarity of like, this option is going to be like $1 million less than this option. But who gives a shit, because this one accomplishes all the stuff that I want. But it's so difficult for people to understand that. I feel like until after the situation, they're like, oh, that's what they were talking about.
That's what I did. Yeah. No, I agree. And that's kind of, that's why I wanted to talk about this differently, because it's not all about money. It's really about, we're invested in these companies totally.
Mm-hmm.
They mean something to us, and the people who work there mean something to us. And that's the emotional side that I think is so important, that it just sounds like the way we talk about it, it's all about the money.
Well,
and I wanted to really talk about, all this other stuff, like the learnings and the.
Well, well said, Jeannie. And like the first 3-4 years of the podcast was about like, it was, I don't know if you ever knew this, but the podcast used to be called Life After Business.
Oh, really?
Yeah. At episode 200, we changed it. So it was really like, what the hell do I do? Like, I sold my baby, I sold my life, I sold my, skill set, my community, my network, and I have to reinvent myself. And that sucks. And it was like this weird way, Jeannie, there's some fascinating, I'll have to pull back some of these podcasts and send them to you, because they're like Bo Burlingham's book, Finish Big, talks about how unhappy most people are when they sell because of the emotional side, where very few people are that mechanical around it. And there's a fascinating, there was a study, oh my God, I'm going to mind blank on the very famous entrepreneur. She ended up committing suicide, actually, I believe, after selling her business and having all this bad stuff happen. But they did these fMRIs, Jeannie, where when they actually do a brain scan of an entrepreneur, when you have a picture of the company's logo and a picture of their children, the same part of the brain lights up. So it's no longer a joke. Like, it's an actual physical thing that, like, this is a blank canvas that I created. That's me. It reflects everything that I have. And trying to get people to like say, like, there's a way to like, there's an equity tied to that, but like, there's different decisions. And because like all the advisors, and I don't know if you have the experience where advisors go to the mechanical deal structure, legal agreements, money. And it's like, well, what if I don't want that? Like, I need to know, I need a trade-off of decisions. Did you ever have, or how would you have looked back and had a different lens on your choices?
Well, that was one of the things as in that session, I was just going through with these different types of buyers. How could this have worked out? How different could it have been? Like, for instance, this DRG, this Indiana generational family, they approached me afterwards to be on their board. And I was on their board for 10 years. They
Wow.
were fabulous people. They were extremely conservative, both politically and religious wise. But I'll tell you, we sat in a room, in a boardroom, and our values were exactly the same around business.
Hmm.
I mean, it was just and that was a fabulous experience. I think that could have been a completely different, I think that was the one that might have been the best. It might have
Uh,
been the best place for me to go, to be honest.
when you think about all the entrepreneurs that you know, and that like, what is the, like, what would you have done, or like, how do you get to know someone like that? And then, because like the money's the after fact, like, but like, how do you get to know someone in an investment banking process for 90 days is probably not the way to meet
It's
your
not the
soulmate,
way.
right? And so
Yeah.
how would, any thoughts on like how you would
Yeah.
have
No,
got that experience?
that's a really interesting point because, I mean, you don't get to know any of them. Even those guys, although I instinctively liked that family, when they came to town, it was like four guys and they would pepper me with questions. And I love that kind of, so where you just sort of, and I just really liked them a lot. Um, so maybe my instinct, but I just kept thinking about they're so conservative and religious. Is this really the place I should be? And, that was the wrong criteria.
Well, and I think it's even, it's probably, well, I know it's a different lens too, if you're especially going to keep 25% versus take the money and it's like you're not hooked up next to someone that you got to make business decisions with for a long period of time. How, how do you, when you
I would have
think,
been more, I'm sure, much more comfortable with the way they made business decisions because they were old hounds. I mean,
mm-hmm,
the guy that we selected, he'd never run a business.
yeah,
He had a technical area that he really knew
yeah.
and a big ego.
Oh, and then you're stuck. Oh, like being told what to do and trapped as an entrepreneur. It doesn't, all of the stories you told up until that point don't indicate that would have been a pleasant
Yeah.
experience. When you think back, you had said you'd mentioned intentional growth right at the very beginning, and usually I end it with this, but before
I
we,
know you do.
I
Yeah.
know, but I'm curious, like what is the, I usually always say, what does intentional mean to people? You can answer that, but intentional growth, I think you kind of embodied a lot of that. So what does it mean for you?
Now, you mean, what did it mean to me then?
What does it mean to you now with all the experience that you've got underneath your belt? Like
Well, actually, intentional growth to me, one of the things I decided is that I've lived my life meeting goals, and doing that kind of thing. And what I decided is the next phase of my life is going to be about following my own curiosity. What is it that I'm interested in? And if it's traveling to Africa to train women, to work with women in Africa and help them grow their little businesses, or to simply travel, or to take classes, or to mentor, that's what I was going to do. I was going to follow my curiosity. I didn't have to have goals anymore. And I really don't.
super cool. I like it. There's
Do
that.
you?
No, I do, because like it was interesting. I'm in EO, and I'm in we're doing a couple sessions recently in a retreat, and like Dan Sullivan's book Who Not How, I was telling Anna to read
Oh,
that,
yeah.
right? And so like freedom of time, freedom of money, freedom of purpose, and freedom of relationships. And like what I gathered from that, Jeannie, it was like it's the freedom to think. Because like here, let me, before I complete my thought, is there, a lot of people talk about how many hours do you want to work a week? And I've always thought it's the stupidest question for me, because
Yeah.
I never stop thinking.
Right.
I don't give a
Right.
shit if I'm sitting in front of my computer or driving or mowing the grass. It's always in my brain. And so
Right.
like,
Right.
I don't want to think about things that I don't want to think about. And I don't want to talk to people I don't want to talk about, and work on stuff that I don't want to work on. So it's like when you say it's follow your curiosity, it's a different way of I'm interpreting as you can think about what you want to think about because no one's forcing you to think about something. And I don't know. I think the whole like how many hours a week. I'm like, I don't know. Do you just randomly stop thinking at 5 o'clock? Because I don't.
I know that's such an incredible question.
So what is the best, like, you kind of gave us a little bit of an overview of what you're doing these days. What's the best way to reach out to you, ask questions if, people got questions for you?
Sure. I'm really happy to talk to people. I love to talk to people.
And
My email, I think you have my email.
yeah, I'll put it in there. But if you want to give it out, I'll put it in the show notes too. If you just want to, for the people listening in.
Okay. It's Jeanne Voigt at gmail.com.
Awesome. And I will vouch for it because you are out there helping people all over the place. And I appreciate
Yeah,
it
I
very
really
much.
enjoy it. That's a big way for me to give back, which is really important.
Jeanne, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing the story. I had a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Thanks for sticking with me, Ryan.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Thanks, Jeanne.
Okay. Bye bye.